Okay, let's do this thing. Jayson Gaddis, it is great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me. If I could just give you a little, give the folks a little intro here. You are an author. You recently wrote a book called Getting to Zero. And the subtitle, if I'm not mistaken, is How to Work Through Conflict in Your High Stakes Relationships. This is, I couldn't have picked a better time to have a conversation with somebody about relationships. And I've gone through your book, and it reads a lot like a field manual for relationships in general, but also particularly for having hard conversations and for working through conflicts with people. So I don't know if this was your intention, but for me, this is a very masculine book. There's a lot of diagrams. You use a lot of math, a lot of analogies to different elements of nature, stuff that's very sort of easy to grasp and understand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lists. And so I think men particularly will really gravitate to this book and like to have this at their side. So first of all, thank you for writing this book. We need more books on how to navigate relationships. This is the one thing that we're never taught how to do. I mean, there's a lot of things we're never taught how to do, especially in school. But we just kind of download how to do relationships from our parents and from just what we're modeled, like it or not, for better or worse, right? And we need these voices, more educated voices in the relationship field to sort of guide us out of some of our bad habits that we all are carrying around in relationships. So thank you for writing the book, and thank you for coming on the show to discuss with people how to be better in relationships.
Yeah, hell yeah, Ben. Really grateful to be here.
So, and you've got a whole coaching school where you're training coaches to help people with their relationships, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. The relationship school,
The relationship school. Kept it really straightforward because I got tired of complaining that this shit isn't taught in school. So I was like, I'll start a school.
Yeah. I love how you keep it simple. So I think a really good place to start, you told a story near the beginning of the book about how you even got into this stuff, because this isn't the only thing you've ever done in your life. It piqued your interest at some point due to your own personal journey in relationships. And the same thing happened for me, in my late 20s. I started to look at things and say like, okay, like I'm starting to see some patterns here in my life. And how do I unwind those patterns? Like I can't keep firing girlfriends. I can't keep just like switching out one person for another. Like, what do I do? I didn't really know where to turn. So, let's maybe start with your story.
Cool. Yeah. So I grew up just as an emotional, sensitive boy with a pretty intense dad and an interesting mother, both very loving, caring humans. But I got the message from my environment that my sensitive side wasn't that welcome. And so I kind of started repressing my emotions in favor of strategies that would get me more love and connection and belonging. And I became a good athlete. I got really focused on sports and performing and achieving, and the detriment of my heart. And started to get into what other people want me to do and who they want me to be. And then I eventually got into intimate relationships in my early 20s, and I figured out how to get girls to like me, because in high school and middle school it was kind of one rejection after another. And once I started getting women to like me, they were kind of into me.
What did you do? How did you make that turn?
This is
you just
a funny
like
story.
Act cool? Yeah.
Well, kind of. My friend Chuck, who was my best friend at the time, he was really good with girls, and I was like clueless and kind of immature and kind of a late bloomer. And I said, dude, I finally was in enough pain to ask for his help when I was about 19. And I said, what do you do to get so many girls to like you? And he said, act like you don't care.
Yeah, right. This is the Tao of Steve. There's a movie called The Tao of Steve. Totally average guy, but he's like bringing these sort of Taoist detachment principles into relationship, and he starts scoring, and all these other guys are like, "What's up with Steve? He doesn't look any better than the rest of us, but all the women love him so much." And he's like, "Yeah, you gotta not care, man. You gotta be real cool, like you actual cool."
Right. It was basically that download. And it did attract a certain kind of woman who was a little younger and more insecure, and wouldn't push back on me. And so when she finally did say, "Hey, I want to talk," or "I don't like something's going on between us," and it felt conflictual, I would just push her away, fire her, feel relief, go out drinking with the guys, and then find a new girlfriend, and rinse and repeat for about 10 years
Mm.
until I realized I was the one common denominator in all my relationship struggles. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I think if the problem's me, then I can do something about that." And shortly after that, I moved to Colorado, enrolled in a master's program to study myself primarily in psychology, and became a psychotherapist and met my wife in grad school. And then there's another chapter story there. But yeah, I was just super incompetent, very insecure, and very had lots of guy friends, especially, but felt very alone on the inside, kind of depressed and anxious. And, I just wanted to get to the bottom of my pain and figure this stuff out.
Mhm. I can very much relate to your story there, where as soon as things would get heated, as soon as she would want to talk about the relationship or something that she didn't like or something that I was doing, or uh, sometimes it was as simple as her really expressing her feelings at all,
Yeah.
other than like, "I'm so in love with you."
Right.
I would. It was like I was firing her. I remember, um, you know, the hotter the relationship, the hotter the fights were.
Mm.
But I remember one partner in particular, just like kicking her out of the house.
Oh, wow.
Just like, "Leave my house, get out of here. I will not tolerate this kind of talk."
Wow. Yeah.
And just this sort of a strong avoidance
Hmm.
uh, tendency, because I had no idea how to have those kinds of conversations. And yeah, as I got older, the realization that like any healthy relationship, in any healthy relationship, it's reasonable to talk about the relationship and to express your needs, and
Totally.
to say like, "Hey, this isn't working for me, and I want some this, or I want that," and starting to realize that like nobody's perfect at doing that. Like nobody knows the perfect way to sit down and have a talk about, "Oh, there's this thing happening between us. There's this thing that you do that really sort of bothers me or it hurts my feelings or whatever."
Yeah.
Very few people know how to do that. Very few people know how to bring that in a conscious way, so that it's just showing up so authentically.
Yeah.
Most of us, it explodes out of us, or it comes out sideways,
Hmm.
through a different expression. And I seem to have these standards where people needed to like bring these things to me just perfectly so that I could receive them. And at the same point, I didn't know how to express myself in relationship,
Yeah.
and I would hold back. And I
Yep.
was a nice guy. Um, so, yeah, as I started to study relationships and personal growth, and see what's reasonable in relationship, I started to see my own holes, own gaps in my game, right? And
Yeah.
this this idea of how you went to do a master's to study yourself, is very honest, I think. And I don't think people are that honest very often
Mm.
about why the reasons for why they went to school, or the reasons why they're in school. Like, why are you here? But this idea of the wounded healer is very true. I can say that for sure, because I did a counseling degree as well. I did a bachelor's degree in counseling, and everybody was there because they had their own um, healing that they
Yeah.
were looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And those
But
became my
yeah,
people, and
yeah,
I love people who are on a journey of healing and growth. And people with that kind of mindset are more willing to have these kind of conversations we're talking about here, and to go into adversity and conflict and work through it because it's an opportunity to learn, right?
mhm. So you went into school to learn about like, okay, how do I do relationships? How do I understand myself enough um, that I'm not bolting or rejecting my partner as soon as there's a difficult conversation? How do I have difficult conversations? How do I ask for um, you know my needs to be met?
Hmm.
And how do I receive my partner when they are uh, imperfectly approaching me uh, to get their needs met?
And I,
Um,
ironically, none of that was covered in grad school, by the way.
yeah,
That
right.
was more
Yeah.
happening in with my therapist at the time, and also my peer group, and then the external trainings I started to do and what I started to study. And I also went to grad school because I wanted to, you and I have talked about this. Like, I worked in a wilderness therapy program with adolescent boys, and I hit a ceiling on what I could do to help them. I felt very helpless at a certain point after working there for a while. And I knew I wanted more skills. I was like, I don't have the chops to deal with the level of trauma and intensity these kids are dealing with.
Hmm.
So that was another motivating factor to go study me, was to learn how to help others more effectively.
Hmm. Best way to do it, help yourself
Yeah.
so that you can help others, so that you're not just like teaching from a podium. You've had a lived experience of that healing. So yeah, you ended up doing therapy alongside your studies, and that's where you started to learn about relationships. So particularly as it relates to conflict, um, yeah, I mean, I got this message. Conflict in my house was, um, it happened often,
Hmm.
and there was usually a blow up, and nobody truly said how they were feeling. Nobody ever really was heard.
Hmm.
And when it was over, we would kind of sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how I learned to do conflict, which
Hmm.
is like hold back, hold back, hold back, and then just like blow up to try to
Hmm.
get your needs met,
Yeah.
and then
Leave the apartment.
yeah, kick her out, right? Um, so there was this sort of like hot, cold um, avoidance, mostly in avoidance, and a real lack of emotional intelligence and understanding what each person in the family really needed. Um, so, yeah, I grew up with this feeling like conflict is bad. It always leads to the destruction of relationship. And so, even though like this is how it is, right? It's like I end up playing out the same patterns that I was playing out in my childhood while trying not to. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, conflict is
That's it.
bad. So just never have any conflict and never have any conversations about the relationship, and you'll be fine. And, continued failure over and over,
Yeah.
trying that strategy. Right. And I know you had a bit of a different situation with your family.
Yeah. Mine was, and I appreciate hearing about yours. Mine was pretty conflict avoidant, I'd say, for the most part. Every now and then there would be a raised voice or a yelling, which was scary. But, anyone looking on the outside would have said, oh, yeah, I have such a healthy family. But there was no attunement and there was no repair. And anytime a grown up would make a mistake, there was never a, ooh, my bad. That must hurt your feelings. Or,
Mhm.
none of that. I often ask people, and we could ask the listener right now, just check in and see if you can recall a memory where your parents or your caregivers actually made a mistake with you relationally, hurt your feelings or something, and actually cleaned it up and repaired it and apologized or owned their part afterwards. And most people, when I have them reflect on that, most people can't come up with a memory. And our parents grew up in a different time, different generation, different tools, no tools, doing the best they could. So I don't have blame here. It's just an observation like, oh, that's
Mhm.
interesting. And of course, it's
Mhm.
going to have an impact though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the case in my home. There was never any like when I learned this idea of repair and how important it is for attachment, for kids,
Yeah.
and how important it is as adults to be able to repair with each other. I was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like nobody's nobody knows how to do this. My family didn't know how to do this, and
Yeah.
there's many, many, many people that I talked to that this is exactly what was happening. And I had a conversation with my mom last week, and she was, we were sort of unpacking my childhood a little
Hmm.
bit together. She had come to me, she'd had some realizations, and it was a really great opportunity to talk with her. It doesn't happen very often. And she said, like, what was going on for you? And, how do you see what was going on for us? And I said, yeah, like, I don't think you knew how to emotionally attune to me because you weren't taught that by your mother, who was heavily traumatized, and you lived in an unsafe home. And the same for dad. And I remember my mom coming to me one day, I was like in my early teens, like, 12 or 13, and I was hurting and I didn't know even how to express it. And she said, is there something I can help you with? Like, can I
Hmm.
help you? And I was like, I don't think so, Mom. I don't know what's wrong, and I don't think you can help me. And what I now know is that, like, I from a nervous system perspective, like I felt like I knew she couldn't help me because she didn't know
Yeah.
how to regulate her own emotions,
Right.
and that's what we were all dealing with as a family. And so there wasn't that attunement and there wasn't repair. I watched Full House,
Uh-huh.
Bob Saget, rest his soul.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
love you, Bob. And for some reason, these like talks that he would have with his kids towards somewhere middle or the end of the episode where there was some kind of a break or some misunderstanding between him and the kids, and he would sit down with them and have a talk about and listen to them, and they would hug, and the whole audience would go, "Ah." That never happened in my house,
Hmm.
but I remember seeing that on TV and being like, "Wow, that's interesting." You
Right.
know?
As if you were like, whoa, that's a whole new world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is why people tolerate either high conflict relationships or conflict avoiding relationships, because they don't know any better, that you could actually go into conflict and it could end well. So they
Hmm.
just do what they've always done and don't expect, the bar is really low, in other words.
Yeah. So would you say that are you neutral on conflict? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing in relationship? Like what does the presence of conflict tell us?
Yeah, well, I don't have it that it's good or bad. It just is, and it's an inevitable part of relationship. So we might as well embrace it and learn how to work with it. And I
So do
do
you
see
have
it as a tremendous growth opportunity.
sorry. Do you think there's a problem if there's no conflict in a relationship?
I do. I think that's a problem.
Mm.
Mostly because it's either going to be a superficial relationship where people are compartmentalizing. Because my parents would probably say, "Yeah, we never fought, or we don't fight," or there's you hear couples say that.
Hmm.
It's usually a red flag for me. It's like, cool. How authentic of a relationship do you have, and how deep is it?
Uh-huh. So if there's no conflict, there's a good chance that there's some authenticity missing there, and that somebody, maybe everybody, is not really speaking their mind and asking for what they want, because
Yeah,
the conflict being an inevitability, that essentially is speaking to the fact that like you can't have two or more people in a relationship who are like trying to get their needs met, and not have conflict from time to time, because you know even identical twins have conflict from time to time, right? And they
yeah,
like a lot of the same things,
yeah,
right? But it's just like by virtue of being two humans, two bodies with separate experiences and
yeah.
cycles, and some people are messy and some people are clean, and some people want to eat now and some people want to eat later, different agendas. You're going to have conflict from time to time. And if it's not there, it means that something's being swept under the rug.
I would say so. Strong hunch. I mean, look at nature. Nature doesn't exist without conflict. There's nowhere that where there's just sun 100 days or 365 days a year and it's perfect and everybody's happy and everything's great. It's nature, and there's build and destroy all the time in nature. There's these opposites of, it's very conflictual out there if you actually go out and spend time in the elements. So relationships are like that. They're nature. They're hard sometimes, and they're beautiful sometimes, and they're amazing and difficult and devastating and all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, how can we learn from conflict? Like, what does conflict tell you about your own edge? About your own, where you need to look at yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, because that's kind of what it is. It's sort of in the question is, wherever you are having a hard moment in a high stakes relationship, a business partner, a friendship, an intimate partner, family relationship, there's this awesome seed, and you can pour water on it and kind of get curious about it and explore it, ideally alone and then with the other person if they're willing. And you're always going to find something probably intense and meaningful and fruitful, right? There's going to be something, some opportunity there to learn about yourself or each other or them. And I think that's a bummer when we miss those opportunities. So, uh, and if you care about the person, like, why do you want to keep withholding who you are from them? That has a cost.
But what if they're the problem, Jason?
That's how some people have it set up. Then, right? It's their fault. They're the problem. And yeah, sometimes it's true that we're with someone who's extremely difficult, a narcissist, or a family member who just won't own their part and they continue to stonewall or gaslight us or whatever. That's hard. Of course. but it's a losing uphill battle to try to get them to be different. They're showing you. That's why I love high stakes relationships, because people show you their cards over time. It's very hard to hide in a high stakes relationship. And so when people show you their cards, like, oh, this is who you really are, your true colors come out. And that's where conflict is. And then we have this amazing opportunity to get honest and more honest and more honest, so that we can be in an authentic, deep, real connection with someone that's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's got it all.
So what do you teach people about how to manage and navigate conflict? I mean, that's a wide open question. Where would you start with someone who's saying, yeah, like I'm in constant conflict with my partner, and we're stuck in a rut and neither of us hears each other?
Yeah. I mean, there's many places I could go. It sort of depends on the couple, but let's say that's the couple. They're constant arguing and fighting, and they're stuck in a rut. Well, we first have to just tease it apart and say, what are you guys? Why are you even in this relationship? What are you doing here? Well, I love him, or we love each other. And it's like, well, is that still true? Because sometimes love is just not really enough to stay, right? There actually has to be a bigger, I think, bigger commitment, a bigger why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of couples don't dig deep and think about the why, right? They
Like
just,
what? Like what's a bigger commitment?
I'm here to become fully who I am, and I'm here to support you in doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's really different than I'm here to just, I don't know, because I don't want to be alone,
Yeah,
or because my
that
culture told me to get married and have kids.
yes, both of those things are very much at the root of so many relationships, right?
Yeah.
They're at the root of um, relationships that last much longer than they should. You know, people hanging
Yeah,
on to relationships they're not happy with because of that fear
exactly.
of being alone.
So where do we start? We start with educating people. A person has to be willing to learn here. And then it's like they got to learn that, like, oh, how I do relationships is kind of still a fairy tale, still a fantasy. I'm still kind of doing it like an adolescent would. At some point here, I need to become an adult and take responsibility for my part. And I need to start actually learning how to become a better communicator, because we all can communicate pretty well, but under stress with a person you've been living with for 5 years, it's much harder. And so that requires skill development, right? We have to learn how to become a better listener. We got to speak in a way that they can actually understand and not monologue them and just railroad them and blame them. We've got to be a little tactical and intelligent about how we speak and how we listen. So, there's a lot we could unpack in any of this. People need to change their minds about conflict, and then they need to learn new skills to become better communicators under stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I like what you said about the agreement of why we're in this relationship. Like, okay, well, what's your guiding light? Like, are you here to make each other better? You know, or are you here to just use each other um, to not be lonely? You know, and if you
Yeah.
can connect to that higher purpose, then you can actually put yourself under some heat, right? And and put yourself under the microscope and look at, like, okay, what's my part here, rather than absolving yourself of any responsibility for bringing more to the relationship, or speaking differently or listening more. um, and looking back, yeah, I think my response in conflict is I stop listening and I
Mhm.
start trying to prove my point.
Yeah.
And sometimes my point is that, you talked about this in the book, like, I do understand you. Like, don't you see? Like, you
Yeah.
said this, and then I said that. That means that I understand you. And she's like, yeah, but you're not hearing me. Yeah, I do hear you, and then
Yeah.
that's what the conflict becomes about.
Yeah.
So learning to listen, I think, was one of my first big lessons,
Mhm.
and some practical tools um, for listening, active listening. And this is funny because um, I had practiced listening in counseling school. I had done a
Uh-huh.
4-year degree in counseling, and I
Right.
would occasionally get criticized by my partners, like, "You're a counselor. You should know this. You know, you should know how to listen to me. I
Right.
should be able to feel heard and understood by you." And I don't right now. And that was like, I wouldn't show it, but I would be deeply hurt by that and ashamed at
Yeah.
what a failure I was. And I would
Yeah.
hide that and I would fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is sort of my whole experience of just trying to listen and not being very good at it, even at age 30 after, practicing
Yeah,
relationships for
man.
10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I'm curious what turned the corner for you. Like, when did you decide I gotta after the degree, after, like, was it an intimate relationship that pushed you to become a better listener? Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, combination of like having enough experience and seeing that like I need to look at myself as a common denominator, entering into a relationship with someone who knew how to ask for what they wanted and say like, hey, like you need to listen. I need to feel heard by you. Otherwise this thing's not going to work. You need to get better at listening. And combined with the opportunity to learn some new things.
Mhm.
We had a teacher sort of enter our sphere, and he started teaching us the basic concepts of conscious relationship
Yeah.
and running these trainings. And so we learned to sit and listen to someone report their mind, and to shut up and breathe and
Mhm.
listen and seek to understand and be curious about the other person rather than trying to wait to get our piece out and to answer them,
Yeah.
or to make ourselves feel heard. And um, along with a number of other practices, releasing judgments and, just speaking truth to whatever's happening in our minds, as scary as it might be, you know,
Yeah.
learning to receive each other in that way. And that's kind of what got me started. It was like doing exactly what you were talking about before. Coming to this understanding that like being in relationship with anyone, you have some kind of a higher purpose that is available to you in that relationship. You don't have to take it though. You could just
Mhm.
use the other person for your means and then discard them.
Yeah.
But eventually that gets kind of old and boring doing
Right.
that, just switching people out, and you can do that in business, you can do that in friendships, and your life becomes more and more shallow and vain as as that kind of behavior goes on, because people who really like substance, they disappear.
Yeah.
You're not trustworthy. And so learning like, oh yeah, I need to have richer relationships, and I have to acknowledge like the higher purpose for each relationship. So that idea of conscious relationship was the foundation and the goal, and then the skills you can build on top of that. And when it
Yeah.
gets hard, you have the perseverance to push through and not run away and not fire the person, and to stay in the fire.
Stay in the fire. It's
Yeah.
huge. I like what you're saying. Yeah. Stay in the fire, people. Because again, if you can stay in the fire, you're going to learn, and you're going to probably have a deeper, more beautiful relationship if you do.
Hmm. So, yeah, you talk about this a little bit in the book. What's a relational blueprint?
Yeah, we grow up in families, most of us, and in some kind of family environment. And every day, all day, from conception onward, you're getting a download about how relationships work and how they go. And that becomes your blueprint. And attachment science has nailed this down even more specifically, around however you did the um, comings and goings and how you did conflict with your caregivers becomes a pretty cemented in pattern into your nervous system around how you're going to do relationship, intimacy, and conflict later in life. And there's two main kind of attachment styles that most of us know about by now because attachment's gotten a little more popular.
Hmm.
But I like to simplify them into just seek and avoid. Usually there's a seeker, a person who wants connection under stress, like, hey, can we talk? Wait, don't go away. They kind of have a fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. They don't want to lose the connection or make it worse. And then there's a person who withdraws, gets quiet, avoids, pulls away, etc. And that's most relationships. Granted, there's lots of variations of that, but for the most part, just to be, for the instruction's sake, it's seek or avoid usually.
Uh-huh.
And that you could call that a conflict style, or you could call it just an attachment style. And um, you can just ask yourself, what do I do under stress? Do I go toward connection or do I go away from it?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes our style can change over time. But this blueprint becomes what we're coming into an adult relationship with. And if we're oblivious to this, that our historical relationships impact our current ones, we're going to be very frustrated. And we're going to want to change our partner and get them to be more like us. And we're not going to understand, oh, this is just how they were raised, kind of set them up to behave like this, and how I was raised set me up to behave like this. And it's really fundamentally not a problem. How you work with those is everything. And when people get into conflict, this kind of stuff awakens, and you get into long-term partnership in particular, and it wakes up and it turns on the attachment system in the brain, and we start doing the seek avoid thing. And so not only are you fighting about the dishes or about who said what yesterday, but there's this pattern now. You come toward me, I go away from you. Shit, how are we going to deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
And when couples can get a little hip to this frame and their relational blueprint, then they can educate each other, they can learn, they can have compassion for where the other person came from. And then you can bring a little more levity and understanding into, working through a conflict and getting to the other side.
Yeah, that acknowledgement that we tend to want the other person to be more like us is so funny. And it's
Yeah.
it's a sign of how infatuated we all are with ourselves and how we think, if the whole world was like us, then everything would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's particularly funny that we get into a relationship with someone precisely because they're opposite of us in a number of ways, and they're interesting to us. They're intriguing. We're
Yeah.
curious about them. Like, oh wow, I want to understand you. You're such an interesting phenomenon. Like I want to get into your head or get into your body. And
Mm-hmm.
that polarity is what creates romance. And then we get into relationship and we get deeper and deeper, and the deeper we go, the more we are sort of victims of that mindset that like the other person should just do as we say and be more like us. And wouldn't that be boring? Like it would be so
So
boring.
boring. Yeah. So stale, so vanilla, but understandable. People do this, and it's kind of a human nature thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So to be able to just acknowledge that between the two of you and say it from time to time can really sort of bring you back down to earth. Like, oh, let's remind each other, like, we're not here to make the other person more like us or to change them per se.
Yeah.
We're here to change ourselves, right? And Shalina and I, at our wedding, we did vows, but before we did vows, we did what we called shadow vows. And they were really more like shadow acknowledgments. We weren't vowing to like live by our shadow, but we both had that element in there.
Mm,
Like I
like
will
it.
I will sometimes seek to dominate you or make you be what I will have you be rather
Mhm.
than what you truly want to be, and whatever your freedom is. And I will get in your way and I will try to get my needs met above yours, and that acknowledgement can sort of release you from unconsciously playing that out in relationship.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. Yeah. I mean, again, we want to not make our partner wrong for their nervous system. We're all sensitive in a particular way. Even the most shut down man is going to be probably pretty sensitive deep down inside. We want to go for understanding. Like, wow, where do you come from? Why are you like this? And how can I handle you better? How can I have a whole chapter in the book on, there's two chapters. One is how do I handle my triggers and my nervous system and my scared animal, and how do I handle yours? Because look, when you're in a partnership, you don't get to just like, oh, your shit is your shit, tough shit. Sorry, go deal with that. It's you chose to be in a partnership. Part of the responsibility of being an awesome partner is learning how to handle their nervous system when they get mad, when they get sad, when they get hurt. Your job is like, yeah, how do I show up for you? Especially when I'm triggered. That's really hard. Yep, that's really hard, and you can do it.
And that makes so much sense to me that you're saying that, because it's kind of like the natural progression of things is what's next. after learning how to be in a romantic relationship with someone, what tends to happen, not always, but kids end up in the picture. A
Yeah.
child comes into the world
Yeah.
through most romantic relationships, and that's exactly what you have to do in that scenario as well. You have to learn how to attune to the nervous system of this little human that has
Yeah.
their own personality, their own needs, their own perspective, their blinders on, whatever. And it's almost like learning how to be in relationship and resolve conflict there, and how to navigate things over the long term is your training ground for how to raise a human in that
Yeah.
same way, right? And any group where you introduce another being into it, it becomes more complex all of a sudden, right? You get
Yep.
like family dynamics going on. So it's like it's your next level up, right?
Totally. And I love
Yeah.
that challenge as a parent personally, and as a family guy. It's been such an honor to learn to understand my kids' nervous systems and who they are and who they're becoming, and navigate this stuff with my wife in front of them. And it's just a really, to me, it's a magical crucible to learn and grow.
Mhm.
Highly recommend.
So you shared about sort of seek and avoid, and yeah, I think people are sort of waking up to that, you know, anxious avoidant dynamic, um, and I like how in the book you actually took another spectrum and you overlaid it with seek and avoid, and that being collapse or posture.
Yeah.
And the posture is this sort of like I'm coming out, I'm puffing up like a porcupine, and the collapse is like I'm retreating into my shell like a turtle. And um, the interesting thing for me observing that was thinking about where I fall in that spectrum. Like, I'm definitely avoidant, but I'm actually a posture.
Hmm.
I the way that I've learned to get my needs met is to fight. So I end up
Hmm.
fighting my wife
Uh-huh.
just to feel heard.
Yeah.
And it's confusing for her because it's not exactly what she had to deal with growing up. And she's like,
Yeah.
"Why are we fighting right now? Like, why do I feel like I'm fighting you?" And I, I'm like, I don't know how else to express my needs.
Uh-huh.
I just think I need to fight. And
Yeah.
she's called me on it a number of times.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd just point that out, that there's this, there's these interesting dynamics that happen based on how we grew up. That it's not just like you either like avoid and retreat into your shell, or you're like attacking and posturing,
Yeah.
or seeking and posturing. It can be a combination of any of those.
Yeah, it can be nuanced. And yeah, you're talking about the four disconnectors, or you could say they're conflict attachment styles. Um, I the diagram Ben's talking about is there's like a circle in the middle, and that we call zero, and that's where we want to be with our partner or
Uh,
a close, friend. We want to be at zero, and zero meaning there's zero conflict and we're in a good place right now. But the moment there's a stressor, or you roll your eyes at me or raise your voice or something happens, we disconnect from not only our own body and our own internal experience, but from each other. And I say we disconnect in one of four ways: we posture, collapse, or we seek or avoid.
mhm,
And like you're saying, it's nuanced. We can have kind of two. Usually we gravitate towards two of them, not all four. Of course, there's times where we might do all four, but most of us are gravitating towards one or two.
mhm. And so, yeah, what's at the core of getting back to zero? What's one of the core principles that people can latch onto? Because as I read um, your book, it really felt like one of the key pieces is like honesty,
Hmm.
and having a more authentic um, interaction.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to put some other pieces in place to like get to honesty, get to
Yeah.
the level of safety where we can share and be heard.
Yeah.
But I feel like learning how to really fully be honest and authentic um, seems to be one of the key pieces.
Yeah. And one of the first things, I agree with you, it is one of the key pieces. One of the first things we can do is, in being honest, in honesty practice, is to just say, I'm scared to be myself here. I'm scared to say what's actually occurring. And you don't even have to say it. You can just, it's like the step before saying it is to say and acknowledge what is true, which is, I've been holding back here. I'm scared of what you're going to think. I'm scared of what you're going to do. I'm scared of your reaction. I'm scared of my own feelings if you get upset. I'm scared I'm going to lose you. And just that alone is huge because also it'll tell us who we're with. If we're with an awesome person, they're going to be like, thank you for being so honest. If we're with someone who's maybe not so good for us, they might blame us or make us wrong for being scared.
Mhm.
They might judge us, make fun of us, go away, not return our text, and disappear, ghost us. So honesty is a great filter, right, of who we want in our life and who we don't want in our
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like, did I have did I ever feel any safety as a kid to say I'm scared, especially
Yeah,
as a boy?
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah, no, I didn't.
no way.
No, no way.
So we have to teach ourselves that, and we have to practice that with each other in order to sort of relearn that. I had a friend reach out the other day, and he reached out to me and one other guy in a little group chat, and he was like, "Guys, I need some help here. I'm dating a woman that I am into this relationship, and something is really bothering me about her, and I don't know how to talk to her about it. And it's that she eats with her mouth open.
Mm,
She's like,
hmm.
chewing,
Yep.
and it that's one of my pet peeves. I can't stand it. And so whenever we're eating together, I'm agitated, and it throws me off for a while, and then I have to like go spend some time alone just to breathe about it. And I am scared that I'm just going to blow up at her at some point. It's not going to end well. And
Hmm.
I've literally broken up with women over this in order to avoid having this conversation. What do I
Yeah.
do? And we were like, yeah, you need to have the conversation. And we gave him some guiding principles for doing that. And it was exactly what you just said. Sitting her down. Like, first of all, you want to do it not when she's doing it at that moment because you're going to be too triggered. You want to do it when
Yeah.
you're not triggered if possible. If this is a consistent issue, and sit down and tell her, start with, hey, I'm afraid to have this conversation. I'm afraid that it's going to come between us. I'm afraid I'm going to lose you. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt your feelings. And I don't want any of that. I just need you to hear me. I just need to express myself about something that's important to me. And, um, and then a few other guiding principles. And anyways, he went and did it, and it went well. And it opened up this whole other, um, piece in the relationship where forum. It opened up a forum for them to talk about what they don't like about each other, and
Hmm.
it's taken them to their next level. She revealed to him the next day that something that she didn't like about how he was operating,
Yep.
and he was like, I know she wouldn't have told me that if I hadn't
Yeah.
told her
Taking
this
the
thing over
lead and
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. It's powerful. Yeah. And I always like to encourage just a little add on something we can coach him around, or for the listener is it can also be helpful to say, look, I don't need you to be different. I just need to express what happens for me when you're like this, when you do this
Hmm.
behavior. Because sometimes we'll get in we try to get into this thing of, and I need you to not do that anymore.
Yeah. Right. The
Yeah.
second part of like, you're kind of describing nonviolent communication, but sometimes nonviolent communication can get into this. If it's done a certain way, it can just feel very almost manipulative,
Mm,
right?
uh-huh.
Like, yeah, I feel this way when you do that, and therefore I need you to do this in order to feel blank,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. And I'm saying, like, what that can do, especially in early relationships, is now she could go, oh, cool. Well, I don't want to lose you. So I'll stop doing that.
Hmm.
When she has maybe, say it's an unconscious pattern and she actually can't stop it. She doesn't have a lot of awareness. And so it's just what she does. And also, then he loses the opportunity to learn about himself. Like, God, why is this so triggering for me? And actually, interestingly, side note, a lot of avoidant attachment style people have a thing with chewing. They have an irritation with sound and mouth and clicking and
Really?
body stuff, like in the bathroom and
Uh huh.
fingernails and how you brush your teeth and floss, and it's a whole thing. So that's just a curious thing. Like, he could keep learning about, like, what is this about me, right? Versus, you need to change so that I don't have to feel uncomfortable anymore and irritated.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, I didn't know that about avoidant folks. That there's like a pattern there where they tend to just be impacted by sound.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of avoidance grew up in homes where closeness wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
There wasn't a lot of holding, there wasn't a lot of physical touch, there wasn't a lot of physical closeness. So when they get into physical closeness as adults, they have irritation, they have like threat responses. It's
Wow.
uncomfortable, it's new,
Yeah.
it's like what is this?
Yeah. So it can show up as just being signaled by this little thing that's right here in your face.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh huh. Wow. So you said something in the book, and I'll quote you. I don't understand her until she feels understood.
Yeah.
Uh, what was that about?
Yeah, that's I call this tool really a practice called LUFU, and it stands for listen until the other person feels understood. LUFU. And I got into a snag for years with my wife where she would say, it was kind of like you were saying earlier, like she'd say, "You don't understand me. This is not what I'm saying." And I'd say, "Yes, I do." And we'd be arguing about whether I understand her or not.
Yeah, yeah, very much resonate with that. Yeah.
And so I just finally changed the rule. I was like, Jesus, I don't like being defensive. I don't like being a stubborn ass here. So what if I change the rules and I set the whole thing up as a game where I don't actually understand her until she lets me know that she feels understood. So the locus of control is in her court to say, thank you. Yeah, I feel understood. And that was a massive game changer for a relationship. And it's a basic 8-step process where you really just like really show up as hard as you can to really try to understand the other person's experience, and goes a long way. It's a game changer.
Oh yeah. I mean, understanding the other person's experience is so fundamental. I've been to a few relationship workshops. One with the Gottmans in
Uh-huh.
Seattle.
Yeah.
We we got there just in time, by the way, because the Gottmans had been going for decades, and I believe they retired right after we did like their last workshop.
Mm.
And then we also went to Harville and Helen Hendricks's
Yeah.
workshop at Esalen. And
Nice.
very blessed to get some time in the room with more relationship veterans, from
Yeah.
the previous
Totally.
generation.
Legends. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see guys like you as sort of taking the torch and carrying it
Mm.
forward. And that was right before COVID, so I don't know that Harville and Helen will do more workshops either. But anyhow, at the core of their teachings, Hendricks and the Gottmans, is all of these practices to help you understand each other,
Yeah.
help you like really hear and value and empathize with the other person's experience and reflect that back to them so that they actually feel like you heard them, because we're actually, most of us tend to be pretty bad at listening to each other, and we just want to get our point across, and we just don't know
Mhm.
what it's like to be that person. No matter what you do, uh, you can't ever fully step into another person's shoes, but the best thing you can do is try, like
Yeah.
actually put a concerted effort into like, what is it really like to be this person and to have their experience of what it's like to be with me or what it's like to be in the world and to be feeling what they're feeling right now and reflecting that back to them. And it's funny because like so much of what they were teaching, validation and empathizing and paraphrasing back to a person and then summarizing what they said, this is all the stuff I learned in counseling school.
Yeah.
And here I am like 35 years old, and I'm I'm like, okay, I have to do this in my relationship. Like I thought my relationship was exempt and that I could just be myself
Right.
and not have to apologize for anything. Right. But no, like I need to take those things and do them here in my most high stakes
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how I feel so blessed and grateful that I got a master's degree essentially in listening, right, and learning about people. And how many couples have zero education, zero training, and zero tools, and they're trying to make all this stuff work. I'm just like, wow, it's hard enough for a former therapist coach here that this does this for a living. Like, you want to make it harder for yourself, don't learn a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, everybody struggles. I think that's an important message for everyone to hear, is that like, I still have plenty of issues in
Yeah.
in my relationship. And
Same.
when we went to Harville and Helen, they told a story about uh, you know I think multiple times where they wanted to end their relationship. Like
Yeah.
even after like they had written Getting the Love You Want and they had a whole team behind them, they went to their team and said, "Hey, we're gonna divorce."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then,
I interviewed them about this story. It's fascinating.
right. Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
love to
Pretty
hear it
cool.
again. And yeah, I mean it's a very important story for people to hear. Because nobody's immune to this. We're all walking around
Yeah.
as wounded children and with limited skills, limited perspective.
Totally. Yeah. And I was just coaching a couple this morning on a show like live. And, the whole point was like just to make this normal. We all struggle. This is a normal couple here. There's nothing quote wrong with them because they're in a challenging moment early in their relationship. They're normal. This is going on everywhere. So it's refreshing to hear people who teach this stuff, right? That yeah, this is God. I got in a fight with my wife yesterday, and we couldn't figure it out. And
Mhm.
I mean, I say in the beginning of the book, I wrote this book primarily for me, so I could make sure this goes in.
So it goes in deep, right? Like you really
Yeah,
want to learn something, write
yeah,
about it, teach it.
yeah,
Yeah. So the last thing I'd love to touch on is the roadblocks to reconnection. 10 roadblocks to reconnection. Because when I
yeah,
read that list, I was like, oh, it's really hard not to look at that list and then do those things.
uh-huh.
Like you
Right.
put a name to some stuff that I've known at some level that I was doing in conflict, in
Mhm.
conversation with my partner, that once I acknowledge that like I'm here to do the work, I'm here to try to be better in this
Yeah.
relationship. Um, I can't do these things anymore. These are my do not do's. These are my
Nice.
these are my own red flags
Yeah. The do nots.
in conversation. Um, I wrote them down. Uh, you probably know where it is in your book, though.
Yeah, I'm pulling
Uh,
it up right now.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the 10 are blame, apologies, distraction, avoidance, time, which is an interesting one I'd like to hear. Compartmentalization, fracking. Also want to know about fracking. Hope and pray, defensiveness, stonewalling. That's my favorite. I'm real good at that. And gaslighting.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could unpack any number of those. Let's start with fracking. Um, and I can talk about time or whichever one you want after that. So fracking is just a fun term I created. I actually was kind of modified from a men's organization in Denver. They used to call it frapping, and I tweaked it to fracking. And frack stands for fix, rescue, advice, complain, and collude, and killing someone's experience. So we say
Right.
no fracking. So don't fix, don't rescue, don't give advice. Like guys are classic advice givers, problem solvers. I want to fix this, I want to make it better. And often a woman just needs to be understood and felt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So fracking is fine in certain situations, like when you're at business and you're trying to solve a problem in on a sports team or something, great. Like give advice, like try to get
Yeah.
tactical here. But often in a conflict, the other person's not wanting your fucking advice in that moment.
Yes. Yes. And, it's no wonder that this came from a men's organization, because it's like
Yeah,
one of the things,
exactly.
it's one of the messages that men are carrying to each other all the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, don't try to solve her problems. Don't try to solve any of your partner's problems if it's in relationship,
Yeah.
um, like, yeah, there's a place where that tool can be used, but it's not everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife, like, she's really clear with me when she wants my coach hat on or my problem solver engineer hat on. She just asks, "Hey, will you help me solve this problem?" Like, "No, I actually want your advice." And I'm like, "Really? You sure?"
Yeah.
And then we get in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great check-in too. I've heard Trevor Boehm talk about that. Like, honey, should I have my coach hat on right now, or should I have just my partner heart open hat on? Tell
Yeah.
me which one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, time.
Yeah, time, a lot of people just think that, you know what, and this was my parents, I think, they compartmentalize and they use time a lot, which is it'll just be different tomorrow, and a week later, I I feel fine. Like it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't, and we never actually addressed anything, but time sort of took care of it. And what's interesting here is time does give the perception and space away from the person and the conflict. It does feel better, right?
Hmm.
So it's understandable why people do this, but it does nothing to actually repair the issue or learn about the issue or solve it, because it's probably going to happen again.
Yeah. And if anybody, if the person's like me, they actually put that in a little treasure chest of ammo to pull out when
Right.
the time is right later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
That's a
time,
good way.
yeah, time is the old sweeper under the rug technique. But then you end up tripping on what's under there eventually.
Yeah. I call that a resentment. Yeah. Resentment will pop out again. And then it's like, okay, are we going to deal with this now or should we keep brushing it under the rug?
Hmm. What's hope and pray?
A lot of people do, it's sort of tongue in cheek, but people do hope that it gets better. I just hope this marriage gets better. I hope we get through this. But then they don't actually apply themselves and study something or hire a coach or a therapist, or they literally are hoping that it changes. That's a really
Huge.
bad strategy.
Yeah, it's
That's
a
kind of
really
what
bad
I've done.
strategy, and it tends to be kind of like, yeah, a lot of times it's the default, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to focus on other things, or there's lots of this or that going on. But um, I think you and I get introduced to people a lot when they're breaking through that piece of denial, where they're like,
Yeah.
okay, I've contacted you because I did some Google searching, or I started listening to a podcast or whatever, and I need to do something about this. What do I do?
Yeah.
Tell me what to do. I'm ready. I will sign
Yeah.
up for this or for that. And that is a powerful step. I always congratulate people
I know.
when they
So
show up in that way.
it's a big, big step.
Biggest step. Okay. Yeah. Blame. I'm just going to go back over the list here.
Yeah.
Blame, definitely a roadblock to reconnection. Apologies. Why are apologies a roadblock to reconnection?
Because people use them like a band-aid and they overuse them. Um, my son even noticed this on the playground. He's like, Dad, like kids say they're sorry, but like nothing changes and nothing really, they didn't mean it.
Mhm.
And that's because the adults have taught the kids, well, did you apologize to Joey or did you, and like, yeah, I apologize. Okay, then we're cool. And it just doesn't settle the nervous system. It's not enough. Now, some of us are with someone who their nervous system might come down out of threat with an apology, a sincere, heartfelt apology. That could work. And so I'm saying that is okay sometimes. But what's usually needed before that are two things: ownership. I did that to you, or I did the thing that fucking pisses you off or hurt your feelings. And then empathy. I imagine the impact on you was that it really sucked. It scared you, it hurt your feelings, and that must have been really awful. And I'm really seeing that right now. Uh, and then if we want to add, and I'm sorry I did that. Cool.
Mhm.
But you want to look for what is the actual mover of the nervous system? What's going to help the person come out of threat?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I learned in a 12-step program that, step 9, they send you out to like go make amends is the
Yeah.
word to the people that you harmed, unless doing so was, going to just cause more harm. And so sometimes that meant like paying people back that you stole money from.
Mm,
But a lot of times it was like, yeah, an acknowledgement of your behavior. And there's a conversation that happens there about saying sorry and how most uh, alcoholics and addicts quote have said they're sorry a lot in their lives,
right.
and then their behavior has not changed.
Yeah.
They've perhaps at some level wanted to change, and a lot of times, I mean, we just want to get out of the bind that we're in. And
Yeah.
that's why we say we're sorry, which is what's
Yep.
happening with kids, right? This is where we learn it. It's like, say you're
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, it's all good now. Now you're off you
Yeah.
go. You don't have to change any of your behavior.
Yeah. And what you're
Um,
saying is so true about the addiction world. If you've, it's kind of a watered down apology, right? And people start to lose trust. in your word. Like, oh, he said, I've heard him say it before. Yep. He's sure sorry, but look, he's going to go do it again next week.
Yeah. So it only follows that the an amends is where you're actually doing some mending. Like when I hear the word amends, like I feel someone knitting a
Hmm.
you know a if my shirt was cut and someone
Yeah.
was sort of knitting it back together, that's sort of amending.
I like that. Yeah.
And so like it's an action that you take, right? And that
Yeah.
it's much more powerful than sorry. So it's really changing your behavior. So I like that you referenced that here, that like, apologies themselves on their own are actually a block to reconnection, because what your partner wants to see is you actually change your behavior,
Yeah.
right? In some way.
Totally. Yeah.
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 Make it clear.
Reconnection happens through behavior change and genuine, sincere efforts, etc.
Uh-huh. So blame, apologies, distraction, and avoidance. So yeah, avoiding. Yeah, well, you're pointing straight at me, the avoidant person. Like, you will not reconnect with your partner if you continue to avoid them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Looking at the phone, TV, Netflix, like a lot of us, we don't like how we feel. And that's why we distract. We want to get away from that pain. And it just feels really bad to most of us to be disconnected from the person we care most about. So we distract, we medicate, we do something that takes our heart and mind off it.
Hmm.
So
And
fine temporarily, but get back in the game as soon as you can.
yeah, like for me, my experience, being in men's groups and personal growth circles is that it's kind of like a fire. It's uncomfortable sometimes. There's
Yeah.
there's challenge. There's a challenging atmosphere there, um, and uh, you're taught that your reaction is going to be to lean out, to make up reasons as to why you don't have to do the work, or why you don't like those guys. Like whenever things get the fire gets hot, you're like, oh, I've got a problem with this process, or I've got a problem with that guy, or this
Yep.
leader, or this organization is not perfect, so I got a problem. And you're gonna make up reasons to avoid and get away from
Yeah.
from the work. And I kind of experience when I'm having a fight that a lot of times I created in my relationship, because my partner just asked for her needs to be met. I experience that as a fire, and I'm like going to avoid it. I
Uh-huh.
sort of had that vision as you were describing that. I'm like, I got to get away from this fire. I got to
Yeah.
cool off.
Yeah.
And yeah, my instinct would be to just avoid that fire infinitely. But the fire is also the thing that keeps our relationship alive, and it's like something that I want. So I like this analogy of leaning into the fire in relationship.
Yeah.
As the
Love that.
avoidant guy, I want to like be in the cold, but I need to lean in. I need to go towards the heat, because that's where the learning is.
Yeah. And the truth is, you probably want a relationship rather than be alone, right?
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to lean in.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Hope and pray. Yeah. Hope and pray is the last one that I like have a question mark on. I think I get defensiveness, stonewalling, and gaslighting. Those are those are
Hmm.
pretty clear. But what's hope and pray?
Yeah. Well, we talked about hope a little bit. Is just the classic, I just hope this changes and I don't have to do any work.
Mm-hmm.
Pray is sort of, we could take a um, uh, playbook here from, I'm just fumbling with words about playbook, but praying from, let's say, religion, where I don't have anything against praying for things in your life, or, et cetera, but praying on its own is not going to change your nervous system with the other person. It's a relational issue. Too many spiritual people bypass relational development and to try to get around their feelings or get around this kind of dynamic between two people. And there's no getting around it.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Yeah. So yeah, you can hope and pray all you want in your life, but if that's the only thing that you're relying on, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to get done. Like you need to do
Yeah.
the work, and relationships take work. If you want to improve
Yes.
your relationships, you need to do the work. And yeah, like we were talking about, it can be hot, it can be fiery, it can be uncomfortable. There's vulnerability there, and you might have to expose your emotions, your fears.
Yeah.
uh,
You
yeah,
might get your feelings hurt.
yeah.
You might feel really, really uncomfortable. Yes. All that's true.
This is the price we pay.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, man. Thank you. Thank you for coming on here and jamming about relationships with me and talking about what works and what doesn't and just normalizing the whole process for people. Um, I think the
Yeah.
work that you're doing is really important here.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. It's fun to dialogue and jam with you. And thanks for helping the brothers out there.
My pleasure, man. Here to be a conduit. Okay, so how can if people want to obviously if people want to learn more, I think you say at the beginning of the book, like I want everybody to have a copy of this book and I want that too. I agree it should be in every classroom in the world. This isn't just for romantic relationships; it's for any relationship where the stakes are high, as you said,
Yeah.
and where you really get to know each other and you got something to do together. There's a purpose for you being together.
Yep.
Do you think this would even apply in like business partnership or some, where there's like a deeper relationship
Absolutely.
involved with business?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've had to help some business owners work through some pretty hefty conflicts because it's real. The stakes are definitely high there, right? If two business owners are merging finances, millions of dollars, it's a lot at stake there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book, Getting to Zero, and where can people follow you? There's, is it Relationship School or The Relationship School?
On Instagram, we're the relationship school. The website is relationshipschool.com with no the.
Mhm.
I'm at Jayson Gaddis on Instagram. That's JAYSONGADDIS. And
Right
the
on.
book and the book is, everywhere books are sold. Or if you want to take our little conflict quiz, you can go to gettingtozerobook.com to find out your conflict style.
And for guys out there, to be honest, I think there's a lot of guys that listen to this podcast they're personal growth oriented. They want to be a coach or a counselor or a therapist of some kind. They're into the work. They're doing
Yeah.
the work for themselves, but they also want to carry that forward to other people. So, are you training coaches in your methods?
Yeah, totally. Once a year, we run a 9-month training here out of Boulder, but it's virtual, so you can live anywhere in the world and become a relationship coach. And I think our training is very deep, very badass. Yeah, very experiential.
Awesome, man. Thanks for creating more coaches. Sometimes I come from a hub where there's like a lot of coaches and people are like, is there too many coaches in the world? And my response is always, no, there are not too
Hell
many
no.
coaches in the world. We need more and more, I think it seems like we have more people that need help now
Yeah,
more than ever. And, so get out there folks and become a coach, contribute
yeah.
to the healing.
Amen.
Amen, brother. Thank you, man.
Yeah, dude. Good hanging.
Till next time.